Hi, I'm Andrew from Cruisemaster, and behind me I've got our remote area testing Ram 2500. In today's video I'm going to be talking about all the modifications we've done to the Ram and our journey with it so far. Because of where we travel in Australia, we've got to have a frontal protection up the front of all of our vehicles. On this particular vehicle we've got a unique 4x4 Bullbar. This one's actually a first prototype and we designed it with them to make sure it would fit our needs. So the guts of the bar is all steel winch frames, steel channel on the bar, but there's lots of aluminium in it, like this fascia panel on the front and the bash guard underneath. We did that to make sure we didn't add too much weight to the front of the Ram. So we went for this low style of bar, I think they call it a crawler bar at Unique, because of quite a few reasons. Obviously one is we wanted to make sure the bar was as light as possible, but two, if we have one of the more traditional bars with the big hoops on it, there's actually quite a big gap between where the eyebrow pipe would fit relative to the top of the channel. And I had really thought that if you hit a kangaroo offset here, it's going to go straight through the gap and hit the light anyway. So what's the point in actually having the pipe there in the first place and having all that weight? So we didn't go ahead with that particular design. However, on the trip we didn't actually hit any animals, which is probably a good thing for the Australian wildlife, so we didn't manage to test the bar other than a few flies that got hit on the front of it. Now mounted to the bar we've got a light bar in the channel here. Now I've had a few bull bars with the light in the channel and it's very mediocre light output as you can expect. It's only a very skinny light bar, so you don't get a huge amount of light out of it. So on the top we've got a set of Nava Ultima 215 Mark II LED lights. They're an incredible spotlight. We've used them on our previous 200 now and on this vehicle. Even on our BT50 now we've got the 150s, I think they are, the smaller lights, and they're all a really good light. Great output, and the mounts are really strong and they don't move whilst we're out bush, so really good product. Inside the bar we've got a carbon winch. This one's actually a 15,000 pound winch due to the size of the vehicle that it might have to pull out. Attached to the winch is MaxTrax winch rope. This is their new product out on the market and it's designed so you don't have to have any metal components in the system. So there's no big thimble that sits on the front of the fair lead there that you attach the rest of the recovery system to. It's all interlinked with soft shackles, which means it's a much safer system for use in recoveries. Also on the bar is the standard GME aerial. So we've got a GME XRS UHF in the cab, which I'll show you in a minute. So we'll pop the bonnet now, see if we can have a look in from the top. It's pretty high and I'll show you what's going on under there. So under the bonnet of the Ram 2500, it's pretty tall under here, so actually working on it can be quite difficult. And given how big the car is, it's actually quite a shallow engine bay, because the Cummins engine actually sits back into the firewall a bit. Must be a bit of weight distribution and clearance I needed to make for that. There isn't actually a lot of space under the bonnet. However, there are two cranking batteries as stock under here. There's a 12-inch battery on the passenger side and a 10-inch battery on the driver's side. Those are wired in parallel, so they crank together. Decided that because of that, we didn't need to put additional batteries in for running the fridge and stuff like that because it's got heaps of capacity. The aim here was to put two lithiums in to start the car. So on the 12-inch side, there is a 12-inch Invicta lithium starting battery. We haven't got a 10-inch yet because they don't have the correct orientation left and right post situation on the other battery sorted yet. So at the moment, that's the factory battery. I was a little concerned how they were going to run together because they're two different charging profiles, but there hasn't been a problem so far. Now from that, the main battery feeds into a switch pro system, similar to what we use in the 200. So that's a steady state switching and relay system. That means we don't have to have fuse holders everywhere. It all circuit breaks itself, and it's very simple to wire in. At the moment, that is controlling the light bar, the spotlights, the compressor, and the auxiliary Anderson plug sitting in the back of the car. In the future, we've got a bunch more accessories that we will fit to it and it will control that down the track. Obviously a couple of big fuses in here for the Anderson plugs hanging out in the back of the car as well. Now, it's quite common in Australia that you fit a secondary filter to a four-wheel drive. On a Ram, they have, on the Ram diesels, they've got 2 fuel filters as it is. They decided it wasn't really much point in putting a third in line with that. Unlike a airbox on a Japanese vehicle, which has the quick release clips on it, the 2 airbox halves on the Ram 2500 have got screws that join the 2 halves together. Now, I was pretty critical about this on our Defender 110 that we had, and I think I'm beginning to appreciate it a bit more. Like, it is an actual pain in the bum when you have to change that panel filter in it, because you've got to get a screwdriver out and undo them all, and it takes quite a bit longer. However, it does seem to create a really good seal between the 2 halves, which is definitely what you need when you're traveling in remote Australia. Also, you can see this vehicle doesn't have a snorkel. Typically for our trips, I'd make sure that our trucks do have a snorkel on them. However, at the time, there wasn't one available. Subsequently, we have got a snorkel imported from the US, from AEV. It's a really nicely made product. You have to rebuild the airbox a bit to allow the side entry for the snorkel. And it's got a ginormous 5-inch body on it and a massive head that goes on the top of the snorkel. It's an absolute beast. So we'll be putting that on in the next couple of months. However, on the trip, I was pleasantly surprised that we didn't really need the snorkel. So it breathes from the grill here up the top. That's actually the collector for the intake. So that's a decent 1.5 meters high there. And I found it didn't really suck dust like you'd expect. And we did a 800mm water crossing as well. And I was a little bit concerned about that, whether I'd get the bow wave and it would end up there in the intake. But we pulled the filter out just after that, and there was no water in there at all. So I wouldn't say that a snorkel is an essential on the Ram, but I think it's a nice to have, hence why we're going to fit that to our vehicle. Right, let's head down the side now and we'll talk about suspension, wheels and tyres. The Ram 2500 has beam axles at both ends, 3-link at the front, 5-link at the back. They both run coil springs on a 2500, so it's designed to be comfortable whilst carrying load. The truck is very tall as it is, so I didn't really feel the need that we needed to lift it too far, because you can fit pretty big tyres under them as stock. So on this vehicle, we went for a set of King's remote reservoir shocks on it, tuned by Mick's Shock Shop. At the front, we did increase the coil length a bit with some springs from King's as well. At the back, we left the springs completely alone because they could carry load really well as it was. So this leveled the vehicle up a bit. Did find though that after doing that, once you put a trailer on the back, you do get a little bit of negative rake on it. So we fitted some airbag man coil ride helpers in the back as well. The King shocks did improve the ride for sure. I can't say I noticed it a huge amount when just driving around with nothing on the vehicle around town. However, when you did load it up with a caravan on the back, it made a massive difference to how the vehicle was controlled. In terms of overall ride comfort, it is very good for a ute. I wouldn't say it's as good as my 200 before that, but I think we've still got a bit of tuning to do on the rear springs, and we'll probably be able to sort that out. Wheels and tyres on this vehicle, we've got some Maxxis 295/70 R.A.T tyres on them with R.A.T rims. The tyres are not quite 35 inches, they're 34.5 inch. What I was aiming for here is not having to go for a really wide tyre, because that's going to increase your fuel consumption quite considerably. So they went slightly wider without going too much. My aim was also to keep them under the factory flares. However, my maths didn't quite work out, and the tyres did stick out of the flares. So these have got some aftermarket flares out of SCD. They colour match them to the black pearl underneath before we put the wrap on the top. So underneath they are protected and colour coded. Because of the wider tyres and the wider flares, we've got some rock blocks, mud flaps. We imported those from the US. Great thing about these is they're nice and wide and they're adjustable, so you can position them to suit the particular tyre that you've got on. They're also slightly longer than an OE mud flap as well, so you get a bit more protection from them overall. So moving on from there, did mention that we did wrap the car. So this is a satin black wrap with obviously with all our Cruisemaster branding on it. And that's done by our friends over at Armour Doctor. They did the whole wrap again. If you look carefully, there's actually a stag on the bonnet, which looks pretty cool. Same as what we did on the 200 as well. Moving along, most vehicles that you tow with over in Australia, you're going to fit a set of aftermarket tow mirrors on. Great thing about some of the American vehicles is they come from the factory. Wouldn't surprise me if that's where the Australian guys got their ideas from. So these rotate like that, and they have electric adjustment on both of the reflectors as well. Obviously they've got big cameras on all over this vehicle as well, so they're mounted to the mirrors as well. Don't have a roof rack on this vehicle. A couple of reasons for that. Firstly, with the tray, I didn't think I needed extra space. I didn't want to make it even taller than it was. Not to say we won't put one on at this point, but at a later point, but not at this time. Also, the roof isn't actually equipped with any bolting points like many vehicles are. So it's not very easy to just bolt one straight into the channels on the roof. They have to be riveted in, so it's a much bigger design process. So we didn't bother getting into that at this point. Side steps on the Ram. These are the factory steps that come with the 2500. They're not the prettiest, heaps of chrome on them. I was a little concerned when we went away that when we were doing some of the off-road tracks, particularly around Finke Gorge National Park, we were going to hit them on things, but as it turned out, because it's got a decent amount of clearance, it wasn't actually a problem. Regardless of that, I had ordered a set of American-made retractable steps for the Ram. We fitted one side on and wired them all in and started using them. They didn't work quite as well as I was hoping for, functionally. But additionally, when they tuck up, unlike some of the Clearview products that kind of tuck up here, they tuck up inside the sill, which makes it a really nice, clean look. The Ram looks really high with them on. But what it meant is when you're on the dirt roads with the rocks flying everywhere, there's no actual protection from those small rock impacts underneath the sill there and on the seam. So I was a bit concerned we're going to remove a lot of paint under there and potentially do some damage. So we took those off, we put the OE steps back on. We've got some ideas in mind of what we're going to do with steps, but we haven't quite sorted that out yet. So once we've figured that out, we'll show you what we've done. The good thing about them is they are very functional, makes it easy to get in and out of the car. And you don't, you probably underestimate a bit the extra length on them here at the back of the tub. That is actually quite useful for getting into the tub. There was an occasion on the rat run where we got the Ram bogged at the side of the road and we had to climb out the passenger side and shimmy down the side step and climb through the tub to get out. And without these side steps, I reckon we'd have got pretty muddy. So they actually did quite a good job. So from here, let's head round into the tub and I'll show you what's going on there. As with all of our builds at Cruisemaster, we try to keep the weight as low as possible. So when designing this, I was having a look at the options between the tub, a tray, and a canopy or service body. One of my mates down in Melbourne, he runs the Auto Innovation Centre, and he actually had a Ram 2500 in, and about the same time I was looking at this. And he weighed the tub and the bumper on this, and together it weighs about 200 kilos. When I went out to market to see what the weight of trays and canopies were, it is quite a bit more than that. So you can get a really lightweight, light duty aluminium tray for a 2500 for about that 200 kilos. We wouldn't have been particularly practical, and I don't think it would have been strong enough to handle what we throw at it. Obviously the service body and canopy would have been a really good option, plenty of storage, but they start at 300 or 400 kilos. So as I also didn't want to get into the increased GVM space, which we'll talk about in a minute, we decided to stay with the factory tub. On the tub, we do have a tonneau cover on it. I selected this particular one due to its really lightweight construction. It's only about 15 kilos. It's got Velcro down the sides, it latches at the back end here. A little concerned about how it's going to hold up to the corrugations, but surprisingly, it actually handled it really well. So really good product, and I'm very, very impressed with that. The nice thing as well with it is when you lock the tailgate, it actually sandwiches the locking mechanism behind it and you can't get in unless obviously you go in there and cut it open and that type of thing. It does give you a little bit of security along the way. Also around the back here on the tub, the bumper on 2500 Laramies, they love a bit of chrome. As you can see from up the front, this whole bumper was chrome, but we stripped it all apart and stuck it in our powder coater at Cruisemaster and gave it a nice satin black coating there, nice and textured. So not only does it kind of protect it a bit more, but it looks substantially better than the chrome. The tow bars are OE tow bar capable of 4.5 tons underneath there as well. Right, let's have a look inside the tub. One of the great things about these American trucks is the amount of space in the back of the Ram. They day-to-day carting the mountain bike around and picking stuff up on the way from Bunnings and that type of thing. It's a really good amount of space, and you can really fit heaps in here. What we've done to kind of make it slightly more useful is we've got a couple of bits of anchor track in the back here that we've bolted down in the back corners. That allows us to strap a Pelican case in there, which is really useful on the trip. We kept a couple of our gear bags in there to make sure they're all dust free. It gives a bit more space inside the cab. Additionally, in here we mounted an ARB compressor. So I made up a spacer plate in there, which allowed us to bolt it into the corner around a couple of the OE fixings, which is really nice. I wasn't sure how it was going to go with dust ingress and stuff in there, but being an ARB compressor, it held up really well. Fridge power is also in here. We did have an ARB fridge strapped down to these mounting points, so we also bolted into the Ram. Now, whilst the tray is very good and big and useful for around town, we did find its shortcomings when we were out bush. In the tub, there is heaps of openings in it. So there's lots of lashing points and vent holes and drain holes up against the headboard there. The problem is they all let dust in. So we tried taping them off to try to reduce it, but it just didn't work. We put a tailgate seal on here. This is an American product that we purchased locally, stuck it all on, and just could not get the thing to seal. So with the Tonneau down, it actually sucked dust in, and you'd open the back and it's absolutely full of it. So we did trial rolling the Tonneau up and just having that positive pressure from the vehicle moving, try to keep the dust out. It actually worked really well. After the first few kilometers, it blew all the dust out and actually sealed. Didn't really seal, obviously, but it kept the dust out from all of our gear. Now the problem is, if it rains, all your stuff's going to get wet, so you're going to roll the Tonneau out. So it's a bit of a pain. Also, on the trips, because it's just a big empty space with no organisation, it's quite hard to live around, when you're with it for 2 weeks, and separating bags and gear and all that type of thing, found a bit of a pain. So the likelihood from here is going to be looking at a lightweight canopy and service body to go onto it, which you're probably going to have to accommodate with a GVM increase. I'll talk about all those weight figures in a minute. So that's all the things going on the back of the Ram. We'll now head inside and we'll show you what we did in there. Inside the Ram, we've tried to keep it pretty tidy and uncluttered. We've got the standard things in here, like the denim Superfit seat covers, like I had in every vehicle, protecting the seats. Good thing about these is they're still pretty comfortable. They don't have that harsh canvas feel that you get out of some of the other products. So really happy with these once again. Got a scan gauge too, standard fitment to all our diesel vehicles, so we can keep an eye on everything that's going on in the engine bay. In the back here, we've got a 600-watt projector inverter with a remote head, so we could charge all our camera gear whilst we were on the run. This car's got a really good sound system from standard. It's got a great big 12-inch screen, which has got CarPlay and Android Auto and all that typical stuff you've got to have these days, but that's connected to an Alpine sound system with a subwoofer under the back. So for those long days on the road playing the music, it's really good. Now, how about the other stuff that we've put in here? In this cubby hole in here, this is where we've got the controller for the Switch Pro. So that means we can get to everything as we need it, all the switches, all the switch controls. However, at the same time, we can hide it away when it's not in use and it's not adding any more clutter. We've also done the same thing with the UHF head unit. So this center console here actually is the 6th seat. But underneath, it took me a while to find this, but there's actually another storage hole under here. So we've got the UHF stored under. So we put it there when we're not using it, and then whilst we're on the trip, we just pull it out there and put it into one of the cup holders. It's really good hidden position. One of the things we do need to have a play with is having a permanent place to kind of hook the UHF, because with the gear that you've got on one of these trips, and a couple of bottles of water, a wallet and a set of keys in the console here, and it's getting a bit cluttered. So we need to find out another solution to try to attach that somewhere. So that'll be the next step for us. So The rest of the interior of the Ram is pretty standard and uncluttered. Generally the vehicle is really comfortable. It's really easy to do many kilometers in a day in the Ram. However, we did find towards the end of the trip the seat bases are quite firm and did become a bit uncomfortable. I found my tailbone was hurting by the end of the trip. I think they're probably not bedded in yet, but hopefully they'll kind of free up and get a bit more comfortable as we get a few more kilometers on the Ram. Engine mods and power-wise in the Ram, we really haven't done anything to it. So I think it's 270 kilowatts as standard, 1150 Newton meters of torque. So considerably more torque than Land Cruiser 200 and most things out there on the market. So it tows really well. There was no point on the trip where I thought I needed more power. It was very easy to overtake road trains and that type of thing with a caravan on the back. So probably not an area we really need to get into. Got a great big exhaust on it as well. The good thing is you don't actually hear it. So I don't really like loud droning exhaust whilst you're spending 2 weeks in the car. It becomes pretty hard to live with, so we're not going to bother going down that track at this point. Fuel economy wise, around town it's the same, if not better than the 200 was. So it says about 14 litres per 100 on the dash, probably a little bit more than that because they tend to read a bit low, whereas the 200 was about 15.5, 16. On the highway it does about 12 litres per 100, so pretty economical. Then with a 2.8 ton trailer on like we had on the R.A.T run, 3 people in the car and quite a bit of gear in the tub, we were doing about 17.5 to 18 litres per 100, which is definitely better than the 200. So definitely on the highway, under load, it's surprisingly economical for the size of the vehicle. So let's talk about weights. The Ram 2500 has a 4.5 ton GVM, which is the maximum that you can drive on a standard license. When we first picked it up, we weighed it and it had an 877 kilo payload, and that is without the factory tow bar. Once we were finished, it had about a 705 kilo payload. So that's about 80 kilos for a Bullbar, another 20-30 for the Winch. The tow bar weighs about 60 kilos, and obviously a few compressor and ancillary stuff in there as well. So we lost a bit of payload quite quickly. 700 kilos is not enough to tow a 4.5 ton van with a 450 kilo ball weight with 2 drivers and a bit of gear in the car. So it's looking like we're going to have to do a GVM increase to it. Particularly as we're looking at putting a service body on, which will weigh more than the tub, we're going to need a bit more payload after that as well. There's a couple of options there that we're looking into, whether we do a 10% GVM increase or find an SSM pathway. But once we figure that out, we'll show you what we've done. The downside of going over 4.5 tons is that you need a truck license at minimum and a light rigid license and LR. Downside of that is it does mean that you have to be completely 0 blood alcohol level when you're driving it. Obviously on a R.A.T run we would do that anyway because we want to make sure that we don't have any unneeded accidents, but it's something to consider. Last of all, I just wanted to talk about a few other little experiences we had with the Ram along the way. What we did find after putting the bigger tyres on the Ram, we went to put the spare wheel up underneath, and there is no space on there to put anything else other than the factory 33-inch tyre. I believe it's this particular tow bar that's on it. There are some American tow bars around that do allow you to fit a bigger spare underneath there, but they're questionably ADR compliant, so we'll stick with what we've got. Obviously putting a service body on there will allow us to put the bigger spare on that, so it should resolve those issues. This vehicle, as with many American trucks, now has got AdBlue, which is a urea additive that goes into the DPF and the catalytic converter, which reduces the nastiness that comes out of your exhaust and hurts the environment. Now, on this, it's got an 18-litre tank on it, and we found on the trip we were getting about 3,500 kilometres out of that 18 litres, which is really painful because once you go rural, the availability of AdBlue at the surveys is almost non-existent. So what we were having to do was carry around a 10-litre can of it that you can get from Super Cheap and Repco and those guys in one of the trailers, so if it was getting a bit low, we could top it up. If you do run out, it won't completely stop your trip, however, you'll be doing it at 8 kilometres an hour, which certainly on any road or corrugations is going to be very miserable, so it's very important that that doesn't run out. So it is something to consider when getting into one of these vehicles. A few other niggles along the way. The vehicle has been actually very reliable. We've had no mechanical problems with it. A couple of teething issues like that great 12-inch screen inside the car. It does switch between pages. It's got a mind of its own sometimes, and you turn the volume up and it doesn't work and that type of thing. However, we have spoken to the Ram dealer, and apparently there is a software update that they just flash on with a USB, and it should fix that, so that'll be going in for that soon. There's a couple of weird noises that I thought was coming underneath the floor when we first got it. And that only lasted as far as a few harsh days of corrugations, and now those noises have gone. Nothing's fallen off, nothing's damaged. I suspect, we think it might have been part of the exhaust. There's a flex joint underneath there, which sits very close to some heat shielding. I suspect with the body movement and the exhaust movement under those vibrations, they've probably created a bit of clearance between each other, and now it's much quieter, and a lot of those problems have gone away. Dealing with the dealers, so this is obviously an ASV vehicle, so it goes through Ram trucks, and there's dealers all the way around the country. So far we have found the dealers to be pretty helpful. The dealers themselves are good. The process for looking into any niggles or warranty claims is a bit painful. Anything major, they have to submit a claim, and then they send out a warranty advisor who comes out and assesses it. So it isn't as quick as you would expect from your big brands like Toyota. However, they do take things seriously and they do get on it. So yeah, just something to consider there. Parts availability. So obviously service parts aren't a major issue. They can be quite expensive. So the pair of fuel filters for this is about $300 bought locally. So it's quite a large amount of money. Haven't had a look yet to see how often you have to replace those. Hopefully it's not too often, otherwise that's going to be quite expensive. Aftermarket parts. Now that is a bit of a problem in Australia. It does not have the support that you'd have for the locally delivered Japanese utes and wagons. So it is quite hard. A lot of the things I have had to look at bringing in from the US, or there's particular boutique dealers who've got the parts, but I don't think a lot of the quality of them is up to what you'd expect here in Australia, and it's questionable whether a lot of them are going to stand up to the Australian conditions. Obviously some have, like the Tonneau cover. They were excellent. The retractable side steps I don't think were that good. That's just something to bear in mind. It's not, you can't just walk down to your local ARB store and kit the vehicle out. It's quite a specialist thing. I guess the good thing about that is it does mean you can make your vehicle quite unique, because there are lots of products out there. You're just going to be quite selective in what you buy. So that's our experiences so far with the Ram and everything we've done to it. So with the GVM increase on the cards and the canopy and service body situation also being looked into, there's going to be plenty more videos coming up on the Ram. So make sure you keep an eye out on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and all those social media channels to make sure you don't miss out.